Kemi, we don't want to hurt you. We just want to help. Kemi's lips twisted into a bitter smile. Help? You can't help me. No one can. It is too late for that. Her voice deepened, taking on a guttural, inhuman tone. You have meddled where you shouldn't have. Now you will pay the price. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly, and the lights flickered. Kemi's shadow on the wall began to twist and grow, looming over them like a dark cloud. Amaka gasped, clutching Jide's arms as they both backed away. Suddenly, Kemi lunged at them with unnatural speed, her face contorted in rage. Jide and Amaka stumbled back, and in a desperate move, Amaka threw the vial of oil at Kemi. It shattered on the floor at her feet, the liquid splattering across the tiles. Kemi screamed, a sound that was both human and animal, as the oil sizzled where it touched her skin. She fell on her knees, clutching her head, and for a moment, the dark presence seemed to waver, as if struggling to maintain its grip. Jide seized the moment, grabbing Amaka's hand and pulling her towards the door. We need to get out of here now, he shouted. But before they could reach the door, Kemi's voice echoed through the room, filled with malice. You think you can escape? This is just the beginning. The kitchen window shattered, and the wind howled through the house, carrying with it the scent of decay. Jide and Amaka were thrown against the wall by an unseen force, and the room seemed to wrap around them, distorting in ways that defied reality. As they struggled to get back to their feet, Kemi rose, her eyes glowing with a sinister light. You have unleashed something far worse than you can imagine, she hissed, and now it will consume you all. With a final blood-curdling scream, Kemi collapsed on the floor, her body convulsing violently. The house shook, and the lights flickered again before going out completely, plunging them into darkness. Amaka and Jide huddled together, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The air was thick with tension, the silence almost suffocating. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the convulsion stopped. Kemi lay still, her body limp on the cold kitchen floor. Jide cautiously reached out, his hand trembling. Kemi, he whispered, but there was no response. Amaka felt tears streaming down her face, a mix of fear and sorrow. Is it over? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jide shook his head, uncertainty gnawing at him. I don't know, Amaka. I don't know. As he sat in the darkness, the only sound was distant echoes of a child's laughter, faint and haunting, as if they were coming from somewhere deep within the walls of the house. Morning light filtered through the broken windows, casting an airy glow over the kitchen. Amaka and Jide hadn't moved from their spots, too shaken by the events of the night. They finally found the strength to stand, their bodies aching from the ordeal. Jide glanced at Kemi's still form, lying on the floor. He cautiously approached her, checking for any signs of life. She was breathing, but barely. Her skin was pale, and she looked frail, as if the life had been drained out of her. We need to get her to the hospital, Jide said, his voice hoarse. Amaka nodded, though her mind was still reeling from everything that had happened. But what about the spirit? Is he gone? Jide insisted, I don't know. We need to be careful. Whatever that was, it is not something we can just explain away. They managed to carry Kemi to the car, and drove to the nearest hospital. The doctors were baffled by her condition, unable to diagnose what had caused her sudden collapse. She was admitted to the intensive care unit, her fate uncertain. As they left the hospital, Amaka couldn't shake the feeling of dread that still lingered. Jide, what if it's not over? What if the spirit is still in the house? Jide put an arm around her, trying to comfort her. We will figure this out, Amaka. We will get help. But for now, let's focus on getting Dara and Emeka to safety. We can't let them stay in that house until we know it is safe. They returned home, determined to gather their children and leave, at least temporarily. But as they entered the house, they were met with an unsettling sight. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt like it was waiting to be broken. As they reached Dara's room, they found her sitting on her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Amaka rushed to her side, relief flooding her as she held her daughter close. Dara, we are here. Everything is going to be alright, Amaka whispered, stroking her hair. Dara turned to look at her, her eyes dull and lifeless. Mommy, she is still here, Dara whispered, her voice barely audible. Amaka froze, her heart skipping a beat. Who is still here, Dara? Dara pointed to the corner of the room, her finger trembling. The lady in the shadows. She is watching us. Amaka's blood ran cold as she followed Dara's gaze. The corner was empty, but the shadows seemed to dance and shift, as if something unseen was lurking just out of sight. Jide entered the room, holding Emeka in his arms. We need to leave now, Amaka. Grab what you can and let's go. Amaka nodded, her mind racing. As she gathered some essentials, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more oppressive, as if they were closing in on them. They hurried out of the house, the weight of the night's event pressing down on them. As they drove away, Amaka looked back at the house, its windows dark and foreboding. She knew this wasn't the end. Whatever had been unleashed was still out there waiting, and he wouldn't stop until it had consumed. Amaka and Jide drove in silence, their minds heavy with fear and uncertainty. They arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of town, deciding it was safest to stay there for the night. The children, exhausted and confused, fell asleep almost instantly in the cramped room. As Amaka watched Dara and Emeka asleep, she turned to Jide. We can't go back to that house, not until we know it is safe. We need to find someone who can help us understand what's happening. Jide nodded, his face grim. But who, Amaka? Who do we turn to? Mama Ngozi tried to help, but whatever that thing is, it is still out there. Amaka thought for a moment, then remembered something Mama Ngozi had mentioned in passing. There is someone else, someone who might know more. I have heard of a man in a nearby village, Baba Agba. They say he has dealt with spirits before. Maybe he can help us. Jide insisted, the idea of involving yet another spiritual figure unsettling him. But he knew they had little choice. Alright, first thing in the morning we will go to this Baba Agba. We have to do whatever it takes to protect our family. With a plan in place, they finally allowed themselves to rest, though sleep was fleeting and filled with troubled dreams. The next morning, They left the motel and drove out to the small village where Baba Agba was said to live. The village was remote, with narrow dirt road winding through dense forest. As they approached, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the village itself was steeped in ancient secrets. They were directed to a modest hut at the edge of the village, where an old man sat outside, tending to a small fire. His eyes were sharp, and he had an air of quiet wisdom about him. Jide and Amaka approached cautiously, the children trailing behind. Baba Agba looked up as they neared, his gaze piercing through them as if he could see into their very souls. "Welcome," Baba Agba said in a deep, resonant voice. "I have been expecting you." Amaka felt a shiver run down her spine. You know we are here?" Baba Agba nodded slowly. "The spirit speaks to those who listen. You're not the first to face this kind of darkness, and you will not be the last. But you must be strong. The path ahead is dangerous, and not all who walk in it return." Jide stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. "Please, Baba Agba, we need your help. There is a spirit in our home, and it's affecting our children. We don't know what to do." Baba Agba gestured for them to sit by the fire. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Leave nothing out, for every detail is important." As they recounted their story, Baba Agba listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking a question. When they finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, as if weighing their words. "The spirit you speak of is old, very old," Baba Agba finally said. "It's a malevolent entity, one that feeds on fear and despair. It has launched into your home, using the girl Kwame as a vessel to enter your world. But now that it has tested the fear of your family, it will not leave easily." Amaka clutched Jide's hands, her fear intensifying. "What can we do? How do we stop it?" Baba Agba stood and walked over to a small chest. He opened it and pulled out a bundle of dried herbs, a carved wooden staff, and a small pouch filled with fine, dark powder. "These are rituals that can drive the spirit out, but they must be performed with a great care. You must return to your home and prepare the way. I will come tonight, and we will face the spirit together. But know this, once we begin, there is no turning back. If we fail, the spirit will grow stronger, and it will claim more than just your home." Jide and Amaka exchanged worried glances, but knew they had no other choice. "We will do whatever it takes," Jide said, his voice resolute. Baba Agba nodded. "Then go, prepare your home as I've instructed, and wait for nightfall. The spirit will sense our presence, and it will fight back, but we must remain strong, for it's only through our will that we can banish it." With Baba Agba's words echoing in their minds, they left the village and began the journey back to their home, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the battle to come. The drive back home was tense. As they neared the house, Jide and Amaka could feel the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to cling the very walls. The house stood silent, its windows like dark, empty eyes watching them as they approached. They entered cautiously, the air inside thick with scent of decay and something else, something dark and malevolent. It was as if the house itself was waiting, anticipating their return. Following Baba Agba's instructions, they began to prepare the house for the ritual. Jide sprinkled the dark powder around the perimeter of the house, while Amaka lit candles and placed them in every room. The light from the candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The children stayed close to their parents, too frightened to be left alone. Dara in particular seemed to sense the danger. She clung to Amaka's sides, her eyes wide and fearful. "Mommy, is the bad lady still here?" Dara asked, her voice trembling. Amaka knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly. "We are going to make sure she goes away, Dara, I promise." But as she spoke the words, Amaka felt a cold chill run down her spine. She could sense the spirit's presence, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. As night fell, the house grew colder and the shadows deepened. The candles flickered more widely, as if disturbed by an unseen force. Amaka and Jide exchanged anxious glances, knowing that Baba Aba would soon arrive, and the final confrontation will begin. The sound of a car engine, the heavy silence, and Jide went to the door to greet Baba Aba. The old man stepped out of the car, his face calm but serious. He carried the staff and the bundle of herbs, ready to begin the ritual. As Baba Aba entered the house, he paused, his eyes narrowing as he sensed the presence of the spirit. "It's strong," he said quietly, "but we are stronger. We must not waver, no matter what happens." He directed Jide and Amaka to position the children in the center of the living room, surrounded by a circle of candles. The children huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. Baba Aba handed Jide the staff and instructed him to hold it steady, while he and Amaka prepared the herbs. With everything in place, Baba Aba began to chant in a low rhythmic voice, the words ancient and powerful. The air in the room seemed to throw with energy as the ritual began. The shadows on the wall twisted and writhed as if the spirit was struggling against the force of the ritual. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house, and the temperature dropped even further. The spirit was making its presence known, and it was angry. Baba Agba's chanting grew louder, more forceful. "Hold the staff steady," he commanded Jide, who gripped the staff tightly, feeling the power coursing through it. Amaka threw the herbs into the fire that Baba Aba had lit in the fireplace. The flames roared to life, casting an airy light across the room. A high-pitched wail filled the air, and the shadows began to converge, forming a dark swirling mass in the center of the room. The spirit had manifested, its form barely visible within the swirling darkness. It lashed out, knocking over furniture and shattering windows. The house shook as if it were caught in a violent storm. "Do not be afraid," Baba Aba shouted over the chaos. "The spirit feeds on fear. We must stand firm." But it was easier said than done. The marveling energy in the room was overwhelming, pressing down on them like a suffocating weight. Amaka felt her knees buckle, but she forced herself to stand upright, focusing on Baba Aba's voice and the light of the flames. The spirit screamed again, a sound that seemed to pierce their very souls. The dark mass swelled faster, growing more chaotic as it fought against the ritual's power. Baba Aba raised his arms, his voice rising to a fever pitch. "By the power of the ancestors, by the strength of the earth and sky, I command you to leave this place. You are not welcome here. Return to the darkness from whence you came." The spirit shrieked, its form beginning to unravel. The swirling mass became more chaotic, as if it were being torn apart from within. The house shook violently. The windows shattered, sending glasses flying across the room, and the house shook as if it were on the verge of collapsing. The temperature was high, and a bone-chilling cold filled the air. Amaka could barely see through the darkness that seemed to swallow the room. "Hold on, Amaka," Jide shouted, his voice barely audible over the howling sound that had sprung up within the house. But Amaka was losing her strength. The weight of the spirit's malevolence was too much. She dropped to her knees, clutching her chest as her breath came in shallow gasps. Baba Agba's chants were like a distant echo, growing fainter as her visions began to blur. Seeing his wife falter, Jide felt a surge of desperation. He tightened his grip on the staff, pouring all his will into it. "You won't take my family," he roared, his voice raw with emotion. "You can't have them." The dark mass that was his spirit shrieked in response, the sound reverberating through the very bones of the house. For a moment, it seemed as though the spirit might break free, but then Baba Abba's voice rang out again, louder and more forceful than ever. "Now, Jide," Baba Abba commanded, "strike the ground with the staff." With every ounce of strength he had left, Jide raised the staff and slammed it into the floor. The impact sent a shockwave through the house, and the dark mass recoiled, shrieking back as though struck by a powerful blow. The spirit screamed, a sound that was both rage and fear, as the dark mass began to dissolve. The swirling shadows disappeared, dissipating into the air like smoke. The house shuddered one last time, and then, all at once, the oppressive energy vanished. The temperature began to rise, and the air became still and quiet. Baba Abba lowered his arms, breathing heavily as he looked around the room. "It is done," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The spirit had been banished. Amaka, still on her knees, felt the oppressive weight lift from her chest. She gasped for breath, her body trembling with relief. Jide dropped the staff and rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We did it. Amaka, it is over," Jide whispered, though the words felt more like a question than a statement. Baba Abba stepped forward, his expression grave. "The spirit is gone, but the scars it had left behind may take time to heal. Your family has faced a great evil, but you have emerged stronger. Remember that in the darkness, it is the light of your love for each other that will guide you through." Amaka nodded, tears streaming down her face as she held onto Jide. Dara and Emeka, still huddled in the center of the room, slowly approached their parents, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and relief. "Is he really gone?" Dara asked in a small voice. Baba Abba knelt down to her level, his eyes kind. "Yes, little one, it is gone. You are safe now." Dara looked at her parents, then looked at Baba Abba. "Thank you," she whispered, before throwing her arms around him in a hug. Baba Abba smiled softly and patted her back. The days following the ritual was a blur of exhaustion and quiet recovery. The house, though still standing, bore the marks of the battle they had fought within the walls. Shattered windows, broken furniture, scorch marks on the floor told the story of the spirit that had once haunted it. But the atmosphere had changed. The oppressive, malevolent energy that had once filled the house was gone, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a home again. Jide and Amaka spent a few days cleaning up the remnants of the battle, trying to restore some sense of normalcy into their children. Baba Abba stayed with them for a while, offering his wisdom and guidance as they processed what had happened. One evening, as the family sat together in the living room, Amaka turned to Baba Abba with a question that had been gnawing at her since the ritual. Baba, what happened to Kemi? Where did the spirit go? Baba Abba looked into the fire that crackled softly in the fireplace. Kemi was an innocent vessel chosen by the spirit because of her vulnerability. The spirit is gone and Kemi is free, but she may never fully understand what happened to her. It is important that you help her heal, just as you must heal yourselves. Jide nodded, thinking of Kemi, who was still in the hospital recovering from the ordeal. We will do our best to help her. She's been through so much. Abba gave a small nod of approval. That is all we can do. Help each other heal and find peace in the aftermath of such darkness. The conversation drifted to lighter topics after that, and the family, grateful for the sense of normalcy that was slowly returning to their lives. But the memory of the spirits and the battle they had fought will never fully fade. A week later, Kim was released from the hospital. She was weak, both physically and emotionally, and had little memory of what had happened to her. Jide and Amaka brought her back to their home, determined to help her recover in a place that was now free from the spirit's influence. Kemi was quiet, withdrawn, and often stared off into the distance as though lost in thought. The experience had left her deeply scared, and though the spirit was gone, the fear it instilled in her lingered. Amaka spent hours sitting with Kemi, talking to her, trying to draw her out of the shell she had retreated into. Slowly, Kemi began to respond, her eyes regaining some of their former brightness. "Thank you, ma," Kemi said one evening as Amaka sat with her on the couch. "I don't remember much, but I know you saved me. I can feel it." Kemi smiled gently, taking Kemi's hand in hers. "We are all in this together, Kemi. We are part of our family and we'll get through this, one day at a time." Kemi nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I am scared, ma. What if it comes back?" Amaka squeezed her hand. "It won't. Baba Abba made sure of that. And even if it did, we will fight it off again. We are stronger now, Kemi, all of us." Kemi took a deep breath, wiping away her tears. "I want to be strong too, ma. I don't want to be afraid anymore." Amaka's heart swelled with pride. "You're already strong, Kemi. You survived something that most people wouldn't have. And you're still here. That is strength." As the days passed, Kemi began to improve. She smiled more often, engaged with Dara and Emeka, and even started helping around the house again. The family had been through a terrible ordeal, but they were still healing together. The weeks turned into months, and slowly life began to be normal. The house, once a place of fear and darkness, of the family's strength and resilience. Jide and Amaka continued to work on the repairs, determined to restore their home to its former glory. Kemi had become part of the family in every sense of the word. She no longer worked as a housemaid but a beloved member of the household, contributing in her own way. Dara and Emeka adored her, and the bond between them all grew stronger each day. One afternoon, as they were all gathered in the living room, Amaka suggested something that had been on her mind for a while. "I think we should have a celebration," she said. looking around at her family to mark the end of this chapter and the beginning of a new one. Jide raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A celebration? Amaka nodded. Yes, a celebration. We have been through so much and we have come out stronger on the other side. We should celebrate it. Invite our friends, our neighbors. Let's fill this house with light and laughter. Kemi smiled at the idea, and Dara and Emeka cheered with excitement. It was just what they needed, a way to reclaim their homes and their lives fully. They spent the next few days preparing for the celebration, decorating the house and preparing food. Baba Abba was invited as a guest of honor, and he graciously accepted, pleased to see the family thriving. The day of the celebration arrived, and the house was filled with warmth and joy. Friends and neighbors came, bringing gifts and well wishes.